who's winning and who's up shit creek without a paddle. This is your stop for unbiased election projections with BS free talk, analysis, and one cranky politico's insight into the very future of the world you live in. Broadcasting from the gateway to the motherlode in Waterford, California. This is the Election Recon Podcast. And now, he's carpet-bombing partisan zealots back to the Stone Age by delivering cold, hard reality to the fanatics first class. Your host, Army veteran, political operative, and election junkie, Josh Whitfield.
Welcome to Election Recon. It is the morning of Sunday, October the 25th, 2020. 9 days until Election Day here in the States United. I'm Josh Whitfield. Thank you for joining us on this, another episode of the Election Recon Podcast. First off, we apologize. We have been gone for 72 hours now, 72 hours incommunicado, persona non grata on your airwaves and internet screens and feeds. It's a busy time. Everyone here at Election Recon, no one makes any money. We do this as a hobby, even though we all work in the profession of politics and elections at some level. As you can imagine, just 9 days away from Election Day, it is a super busy time, and sometimes it just doesn't work out for us to bring you quality content, and we just don't want to throw a crappy thing together. We don't want to just throw some bullshit at you. We want to give you quality over quantity here at Election Recon. So we are going to update you on the state of the race. We have a special guest who's very dear to me. For full transparency, a little note here, a little editor's note. His name is Heath Flora, and I do work for him. I've worked for Heath Flora since 2016 on a political level, and he is a California state assemblyman. He is the number 2 ranking Republican in the California State Assembly, and he will be our special guest on the show this morning. We apologize we didn't get this full episode out on Saturday. The iMac here took a crap on us, and we struggled through it, so we had to do it today. The iMac failure, the first technical problem that producer Jeff, crown-eating United States Marine as he is, he's not at fault for that one. We are going to put some of the blame on Jeff because I enjoy doing it for really failing to have debate highlights, audio highlights, as we've done for all the other 2 debates, ready to go for this podcast. They were not ready to go, and that is Jeff's fault because he was probably eating a healthy helping of Crayola Crowns as his Marine self does. And of course, the Air Force side of this equation, Lauren, was nowhere to be found, probably stuck in an air-conditioned room somewhere doing whatever it is Air Force people do. So, it's been a jokes aside, it has been another busy week. I say it every week, that every day is an eternity in U.S. politics, and every week is a lifetime. Actually, that's backwards. Every day is a lifetime. Every week's an eternity. The second presidential debate finished this week, and it was an actual debate. It's how I thought the first one was going to go. I don't believe that it really moved the needle much, but I do believe former Vice President Joe Biden made a couple of critical errors, and I believe President Trump made a critical error each in the debate, and I'm going to talk about that today as well. The main topic that I'm going to discuss in the third segment of the show is going to be this clear divide now between the professional prognosticators and the media out there who are still, despite the evidence that we see here at Election Recon, projecting a blowout election win for Joe Biden. there are a small group of other prognosticators, the pro-ams, so to speak, which we certainly put ourselves in that group, who are seeing it a little bit closer and how that it can't, those two things don't coexist. And like Highlander, there can only be one. And we're going to discuss the consequences of who can be right and who can be wrong later in the third segment. So very exciting show. And of course, we're going to answer the questions that you guys continue to send in on a increasing scale every week. And we definitely appreciate you, the fans' feedback to our show here at Election Recon. Lauren, producer Lauren, wants to, I am on hard orders to try to keep this one within 1 hour. So instead of answering 5 or 6 questions, she's renamed that part of the show 3 Pointers with Josh Whitfield, a little American basketball thing there. And we're going to answer 3 questions today and foreseeably in the future, live or not live, but as we record this on our show. But we do go out of our way to answer. If you write us in a question at Elect Recon, elect singular, electrecon@gmail.com, we take them first come, first serve, and we try to shoot you an answer. If we don't answer you, it's a good indication that we're going to answer it on the podcast. So without any further ado, I'm going to get right into it. We're going to update you because we have been negligent in doing so, despite your interest in writing in, and we do appreciate that you guys write in and check on us with the, hey, what the hell's going on? Why haven't you guys updated us on your model and where the election's at? So we certainly appreciate you guys writing to check in. So without any further ado, we'll go right into the state of the race. Little, again, an abridged version of the state of the race. We're not going to do it completely like our weekday updates, but we're going to go in and take a look now here at the presidency of the United States. There's been a tremendous amount of polling over the last 72 hours. We're not, for the sake of time, we're not going to go into that. But you can go check out the state of the polling at realclearpolitics.com. They got all the polls up there. If you're interested at where the polling is at right now, that's a good indication. So we're going to check in, as we always do, with the 538, Nate Silver from 538, his forecast and prediction. 538.com still has the election 87 in 100, or an 87% chance of a Joe Biden victory, 12 in 100, or 12% of a Donald Trump re-election, and they're back to 1 in 100 for a 269 tie. They project the electoral vote to be 345 for Joe Biden, 193 for Donald Trump. Their projected share of the popular vote is 53.4% for Joe Biden, 45.4% for Donald Trump. Taking a look at electionprojection.com and their forecast. They have it now, a little improvement from last week to today for Donald Trump. They have it now 319 for Joe Biden, 219 for Donald Trump. They moved the state of North Carolina into Donald Trump's favor. They still have the popular vote projected at 49.7% for Joe Biden, 45.3% for Donald Trump. Taking a look at statespoll.com. They have it 292 projected electoral votes for President Donald Trump, 216 for Joe Biden. 30 pure toss-up electoral votes. That is 2 states, 20 for Pennsylvania, 10 for Minnesota. Taking a look now at the Real Clear Politics aggregate polling comparison of the presidential race for battleground states from 2016 versus today at 2020. Joe Biden improves to 0.2% better in the aggregate polling of battleground states compared to how Donald Trump was doing against Hillary Clinton in 2016. So virtually the same, practically at 0.2%. Donald Trump's been bouncing up to 1%, back down to a tie. Joe Biden has had a 0.1 or 0.2% the last couple of days, back down to a tie. So, but basically, Statistically, the battleground polls look the exact same today as they looked in 2016 against Hillary Clinton, according to Real Clear Politics. Taking a look now at the election recon, at our model and the shifts that have taken place over the last 72 hours. We've had one state move in the presidential model. It moved in Donald Trump's favor. It is Pennsylvania, and it moves from lean Biden to tilt Biden in our model. 0 to 3% is tilt, of course, and 3 to 6%, or 3 to 5.9% is lean. So Pennsylvania now in the projected tilt column for Biden, that moving into Donald Trump's favor. Therefore, taking a look now at the election recon projection scoreboard, it still stands today at 279 electoral votes projected for President Donald Trump, 259 projected for former Vice President Joe Biden. Taking a look now at the election recon, election forecast, we have it in our simulations, 58 in 100, or a 58% chance that Joe Biden wins the election, 41 in 100, or a 41% chance President Donald Trump wins re-election. We also have it 1 in 100 for a 269 tie, and our projected share of the popular vote is 50.6% for Joe Biden, 47.2% for Donald Trump, 2.2% for all other candidates. Moving now to take a look at the United States Senate. We've had one model shift in the last 72 hours. It is in the favor of Republicans, and it is the Senate race out of Minnesota. It moves from lean Democrat in our model to tilt Democrat in our model, leaving the election recon projection scoreboard for the United States Senate, 51 projected seats for Republicans, 49 projected seats for Democrats. Taking a look now at the United States House of Representatives. Two shifts in our model in the last 3 days. The first is Iowa 4th, and that moves in the Democrats' favor from likely Republican to lean Republican. Also in the Democrats' favor is the California 50th. It moves from likely Republican to lean Republican in our model, leaving the election recon projection scoreboard for the U.S. House at 240 projected seats for Democrats, 195 for Republicans. We have had no shifts or model changes for governors or state legislatures, upper chambers or lower chambers. Those are going to stay the same. In all three of those models, we project Republicans to have a majority of governorships and a majority of legislative chambers, both upper and lower, when election 2020 is over. We invite you to look at some of our most recent election update to get the specific projection numbers for that. For the sake of time, we are going to go ahead and move on in our show. That is where the state of the race currently stands here at Election Recon. That's where it's at, up to date. You got all the info that we have. We're going to talk more about the state of the race and who's projecting what and what that means in the third segment. But right now on the phone is the number 2 ranking Republican, my friend. Again, for full transparency's sake, I do work for this man. His name is Heath, Flora. He joins us from Ripon, California. And again, he is the minority floor leader for the Republicans in the California State Assembly, and he represents the 12th Assembly District in California. And before he did that, before he decided to become a elected official, he was a firefighter, or is a firefighter still today, but he used to be a Cal firefighter before he decided to just wake up one day and run for office. Heath, thank you for joining us, and welcome to the Election Recon Podcast.
Glad to be with you, Josh.
So I explained to all the listeners that I do indeed work for you for transparency's sake, but what I haven't told them is that we were friends before you ran for office, and you pretty much decided to wake up on a Tuesday with zero political experience and run for the California State Assembly, and you somehow won. And here you are today. And so our first question, and we kind of explained your background as a firefighter before you came to the Assembly, but our first question for all of our guests is you plug you. So go ahead and tell all of us how firefighter Heath Flora became California Assembly member Heath Flora.
Oh, absolutely. So we were absolutely friends prior to politics. So it's been great having you on staff from really day one. And as one of my original endorsers, I think you were like second or third, as far as elected officials that actually endorsed me. So, yeah, it was always fun. But you're right. It was pretty much a Tuesday. A good friend of mine, Senator Canella, was in his, second term as a senator at that time. And we were sitting at a restaurant in Sacramento. And coming out of a union, firefighter, worked for CAL FIRE. My family's in small business, primarily the almond industry in the state of California, as well as manufacturing. But having a union background and a small business background as a Republican was kind of a unique place to be. And so Anthony thought I would be a good candidate. And if you would have asked me a decade ago that I'd be involved in politics, I'd be like, you're out of your mind. It was not a career choice that I thought I'd be going down. With that being said, we met a lot of amazing people along the way. And, and Josh, you and I talked about this a lot. When you can stand in front of a group without a lot of notes and just actually have real conversations with people, it tends to resonate very, very well. And I think that's largely why we were successful, is because I wasn't a career politician. I wasn't one of those guys that, went to school to be in politics. I was just a firefighter and an ag guy that got involved. And so I think that's incredibly valuable and incredibly important. And you're right. It was a very contested race. There was 2 Democrats, 4 Republicans. I was the only one that did not have any experience. And ultimately, it was a reap-on-reap race, which it's not always fun to be in a Republican versus Republican situation. But ultimately, we prevailed, and here we are in 2020 going into our election, and it's exciting times to be in politics, both in California and certainly the country as a whole.
Well, exciting is certainly one way to put it for this election. It is hard for me because I do wear the Team Flora jersey.
Right.
And you have many friends in the legislature who are police officers on both sides of the aisle, and I find myself rooting in private conversations and such for them. And I have to check myself, so you don't fire me. But I do. And, and Jim Cooper, Assemblymember Jim Cooper, he comes to mind, and sometimes I just find myself rooting for Jim over you in private debates and conversations and such. So, but I bring that up. for this point because, 1, it's true, 2, it's funny, and 3, I think it really explains who you are. You're a very unique Republican, I think, because it allows you, and it has allowed you to build relationships on both sides of the aisle in Sacramento in a unique way, because I cannot think in my 10-year tenure in politics of another California Republican that has your credentials with labor. And I think because of your firefighter, your service background and experience, you are able to bridge and build relationships that other people can't. And I think that may be important because certainly Republicans in California as a party have really been on the decline over the last 10 years. And I think you, perhaps, Heath Flora's brand of California Republican is in a position to add to the tent, or make the tent bigger, as you often like to say, because you're able to build bridges into areas of the state that perhaps other Republicans have not been able to, especially now in this crazy political environment where perhaps some centrist labor groups, police, fire, first responders, are feeling a little left behind by a certain party and have never really been reached out to by the other party. And you seem to be in a unique position, perhaps, to expand the tent.
No, it's yeah, I really do believe we're somewhat of a hybrid. And listen, I love you, and I don't hold your infatuation with law enforcement over your head. I mean, I love my brothers and sisters in blue, and thank God every day that we have them. But not everybody can be firefighters. Somebody's got to be cops, and we love them for doing so. I mean, not everybody can hang out in their blue chairs and their nice stations and cook nice dinners, and rescue cats. It's a real calling that firefighters have. So it is a constant joke that you mentioned Assemblymember Cooper, career law enforcement in Sacramento County, Assemblymember Lackey, was a career CHP officer. But moving past all of that, I think when you come out of public safety, and I would even argue cops more so than firefighters, just because the nature of their business forces them to be really, really mellow in tough circumstances. Because firefighters, when we show up at somebody's house, people are always happy to see us. They call 911 because they want us to come there. And so it's a very different dynamic when law enforcement shows up, because usually when cops show up, people don't really want them there. It's not a real welcoming thing. But with that being said, there's this very significant distinction between legislators that have worked in public safety, because we actually truly care about people. Cops would not put up with what they put up on a daily basis if they truly didn't care about constituencies. Firefighters wouldn't do the same, because we are uniquely programmed to try to help out our communities. And so when you go from public service into politics, which is also public service, there is a very interesting dynamic there. It's because we are very collegial. I mean, Jim Cooper is a Democrat, and he's one of my closest friends. And so we can build relationships because our entire careers have been about building relationships and sympathizing with people and having empathy for them. And so I do think public safety is a huge asset, as well as guys that come out of the military. Military folks are a lot the same way as well.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I think anybody who puts on a uniform to serve a calling higher than themselves, that really allows you to have a good starting point to have a conversation that leads to something productive. I mean, if you're doing the job right, and we all make fun of each other in the military between the branches or cops and firefighters, whatever. But there is the principle's the same across the board. And if you do the job right, it's about serving and protecting something more than yourself. It's a selfless service if you're doing the job right. And I really think that can help push through this extraordinarily bitter partisan divide that we haven't seen since the mid-1800s. And that leads me to my next question, which is, you are in a high position of leadership in the California state government, and I think it's a fair question to ask for a lot of people out there that are really concerned that half the country is not going to be able to accept the result, whatever it is, 9 days from now on Election Day, and people are scared that we're in for some dark and scary times. So what do you have to say to those people who are concerned that we are not going to be able to put it back together as a country?
I would disagree with them in the sense that I fundamentally believe there is a way to put this country back together, and we have to get past looking at partisan politics. Because here is a news flash: there's actually a lot of really good Democrats out there. There's a lot of really good Republicans out there. I work with a lot of them. We don't agree on everything, but we tend to focus on what we agree on. And I think what people need to understand as far as elected officials go is I was elected to represent roughly 500,000 people. Okay? They're not all Republicans. They're not all Democrats. They're not all independents, right, declining states. They're not all come from the same race, the same walk of life. But my job is to represent them, even though I have an R behind my name. And so it is incredibly interesting when we have certain colleagues on both sides of the aisle that think that their constituencies, based on the letter that they have behind their name, are more important than somebody else's. And I think when we come to a place or understanding that your job is to represent the same amount of people no matter where they live, and their livelihoods are just as important as yours, I think is somewhere we need to get to. Because if we have that mindset, I believe that is the fix. We can have fierce political debates, and I love that. We've been in some heated arguments in committees with my Democratic colleagues. Doesn't mean I dislike them as human beings. doesn't mean that, like, that may be one issue, and I may disagree with them on 9 out of 10. But I'm going to put my energy in focusing on that one that we agree on and get that ball moving. And the rest, we're just going to have to politely agree to disagree. But until we realize, as elected officials, that our job is to represent X amount of constituents, and our neighbor's job is to represent the same amount of people. And if we're from opposite parties, one side or the other, doesn't mean your constituencies are better than that or theirs. And so I think there is a pathway forward, but we as leaders have to change the narrative. If the vitriol that is coming out of Washington, D.C. trickles down into state houses, we will be in big trouble. And I'm also very pleased, because in a lot of ways, the California, Capitol, our legislator, does not really have major issues within each other. Like, we tend to all get along pretty well. We don't tend to blow each other up all the time. Now, the parties will blow each other up. That's kind of their job. But those of us that are actually elected, it's very, very collegial. And that's encouraging. It really is. And there are some people that I don't even know if I agree with them on anything. But we can hang out, we can have dinner together, and we can build our relationship so when that time comes, maybe we find that opportunity to work together. But I think it starts with us. We have to lead the way. Because if we do, I absolutely believe that there is a path to bring this country back to where we all want it to be, and just this ability to have massive disagreements while respecting each other. I mean, you talk to like Newt Gingrich, like Kip, and like that group that had fierce debates, but then we go have dinners together. Frank Fats in Sacramento, the amount of deals that were made at that restaurant with opposing parties just over a meal. We need to get back to that. I think it's incredibly important.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I generally agree with everything you just said there. I generally think it's a great answer, but I don't want to be accused of just throwing you softballs because I work for you. So for a moment, compartmentalizing our personal friendship and our professional relationship here, I want to know from Heath Flora, who is a high-ranking leader in one of California's political parties in state government. I mean, how are you going to bridge this widening, this deep ideological gap between folks here in California, because it's affecting the state immensely? People are bailing on California in record numbers right now because of this ideological divide. California is going to lose one congressional seat for sure, if not two. And I don't think in history, because of the population decline, I don't think in history California has ever lost congressional seats after a census, and we're on our way to losing two. So I think what everyone wants to know, what I want to know, what the listeners want to know is, how is Heath Flora? How can you? What can you do as a leader if you were in charge of helping bridge the gap here, fixing this divide, and helping the moral compass here in California point north again?
I think it starts with conversations, and I think, as somebody who actually likes having conversations with people that I disagree with, we cannot be afraid to go into the Sierra Clubs of the world, as a Republican, to go into a Democratic Central Committee, as a Republican, going into these different groups that we traditionally do not, League of Women Voters, that we traditionally do not have like solid relationships with, and having real honest conversations with them. Don't come in there with some, printed out speech that somebody has written for you, but actually walk in there with no notebook and have a conversation. Just answer questions about what your thought processes are. What do we care about as a constituency? What is important for our community as well as the state of California? Because, Josh, I will absolutely argue with anyone if they want to say that we disagree on more than we agree on. I've had so many conversations with some incredibly liberal people, and at the end of the day, we actually agree on more than we disagree on. And so it all starts, in my mind, with that communication, where we cannot be afraid as leaders to travel up and down the state. I'm sorry, I am a white guy from the Central Valley of California. I don't understand South Central LA politics or what they go through on a daily basis, right? I need to be able to be man enough to admit that. and also take the time to go visit those places, to understand what their issues are, and vice versa. We have a new chair of Ag Committee this year, Robert Rivas, out of Hollister. Okay, he's never really spent a lot of time in the Central Valley, but that man is traveling up and down the state, meeting with the Ag community, trying to get a better understanding. Because if he is going to be the chair of Ag, he feels it's his responsibility to know as much about Ag as he can and to know the different regions. Because when we get stuck in our own little circle, that's all we see. And guess what? The circles are a lot bigger than we actually think. And so for me, we have to get out of our bubble. We have to go talk to communities that we may not have a relationship with. Be willing to have tough conversations and, quite frankly, to admit that you're wrong. To be able to say, you know what, like, I totally missed that. And, we can build off of that. But I think it starts with getting outside of our bubble and meeting with, a lot of different folks up and down the state.
Yeah, I mean, I really do agree with that. It has to start with communication. We got to learn how to talk to each other again as a society, and I think social media in particular has been a huge disservice to that, because it's allowed people to just stay in their own little comfort zone and listen to people that just agree with them, and that just rips empathy away from people that have a different lifestyle, different life experience, and you can't relate with anybody. And I think that's a huge problem with where we're at right now as a society.
Well, and I will touch on the social media thing, and I am not a huge, as you well know, a huge social media fan. And I think social media is one of the worst things that could have happened to politics in a very, very long time. And it was stated to me not that long ago, as it related to social media. Traditionally, every village, and I apologize when I say this, but like every village has had their idiot. You always heard the term the village idiot. Social media has just given all of them a voice. And they rally and they get in this echo chamber. And then it really hurts, like folks that are trying to make good laws, that are trying to legislate. When you're just getting lambasted, it scares people because they feel like the opposition is so much greater, or the support. Either way, it's a lie. And so I think this idea that we have to somehow get back to just face-to-face conversations, silence the noise that is social media, and actually just look at the facts. We have to get back there, because if we legislate based on the feelings of social media, we are in deep trouble as a country.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, and I would also be remiss. It wouldn't be me if I also didn't point out that I concur with you that you are indeed white and from the Central Valley. So I want to transition real quick, because this is the Election Recon podcast, and I want to talk a little bit about the election itself with you. We're seeing record turnout possibly across the entire country. Texas is looking like it's going to be in the high 80s or low 90s for turnout, which is insane. And then here in the state of California, over 6 million people have already voted early in this election. And Democrats are fairly dominating the early vote nationally. It's different in every state, but certainly in California, Democrats have reversed a trend where normally Republicans are the ones voting early. Now the Democrats are voting early. What do you think? What does Heath, Flora think about the state of the election? So 2 questions. How do you think the election is going? And do you believe Republicans are actually going to turn out on Election Day and vote in record numbers alongside the Democrats who have already voted?
Yeah, and obviously, Josh, you're kind of the expert on this. You spend more time crunching numbers than anybody that I know. But as far as like our races in California, we feel very, very good about where our candidates are at, our targeted seats, where we as Republicans are at right now in the state. We've ran good campaigns, and I really don't know if there's anything else that we can do, with the exception of exactly what you're talking about, is the GOTV. Right now, Republicans are not turning out, and that's got everybody really, really anxious. And I'm hopeful that, you have a media and really every well-known celebrity that's been on the airwaves, talking about go out, vote early, vote often, right? And then you have the president telling people, like, hold your ballots, don't mail them, take them in person, really, really pushing this voter fraud, mindset. And so I think it's got a lot of people on our side scared. And if they do not turn out, it is going to be a really, really cold night, election night. I think that's devastating. That's really, really tough for all of us to swallow.
But real quick, I mean, for all of the Republican or conservative listeners to this podcast who may be really worried about the narrative of this early vote that the media is pushing, where are you at? Are you also concerned? Are you cautiously optimistic? Or are you more optimistic than most about Republicans' chances on Election Day?
Oh, I don't think I could say that I'm not concerned, right? But I also absolutely believe to my core that Republicans are going to turn out. This is too big of an election for Republicans to stay at home. I think for the first time in history, you may see, the votes swing on election night, where typically we lose ground on election day because the Democrats, turned out. You're potentially going to see that on the Republican side, where there's just going to be massive lines of Republicans going out to the polls to vote. So, yeah, I am absolutely concerned. But I'm also very, very optimistic in the sense that I believe that to my core that Republicans are going to turn out. I really do. But, if there's ever was a call to action, like that would be it right now. Like, you have to go vote. You have to get your families out there and vote. It is incredibly important, or it will be a bloodbath.
I have one more question here, and I think it's important because of what's going on in California. We've just had year after year, and this one, again, being just a record year for wildfires, and you got some national coverage on this because about a year ago, you spoke on the floor of the California State Assembly when it was in session, and that's pretty unique. I think for the listeners, they should know that you really don't speak very often on the floor, and I think that holds some I don't know some pizzazz, some swag with your colleagues, because when you do speak on issues on the floor of the assembly, it's very interesting. As I'm watching, floor session, when Heath Flora stands up to speak on the floor, everyone kind of looks up from their iPads and their phones and pays attention, because you only speak when you feel it's really necessary. And on this issue of wildfires and how to handle the situation, you gave a really passionate floor speech, and it got national coverage. And it failed. The effort that you were trying to push there was forest management, land management, so we could take these 200,000 acre fires and make them 20,000 acres again. And I think it's just kind of a very important issue, because the state is just a tinderbox and is on fire year after year after year. And that you're really the leading voice on this in terms of, because you're an experienced firefighter. You used to work for CAL FIRE. This used to be your job, fighting wildfires. And, how are we going to fix the problem? How are we going to find a bipartisan solution for common sense land and forest management and battle this climate change thing as well? Because the other side, so with the environmentalists and climate change, that they're just deaf to common sense forest and land management, and then the Republican side doesn't want to talk at all about climate change, and they just want to talk about forest and land management. How are we going to bridge the divide here and get a bipartisan solution done to what I know that you push for? How are we going to get it done to get these wildfires under control? And I sometimes don't understand my neighbors and my fellow Californians here in the state, when I don't know why we haven't risen up to hold every leader in Sacramento accountable to sit down, make them sit down and put together a bipartisan solution to fix this. This is a real damn problem, and we need real damn solutions to this, so our state isn't burning down year after year.
So there's a lot there that you asked, And, when it comes to, wildfires and the state of our forest system, it is something that, as Josh, I can talk ad nauseum about it, really because it was my background. Coming out of CAL FIRE, and this was, let's just say, a decade ago. The forest system was overgrown then. And now we just have a decade, 12 more years of growth on top of that. And really it comes down to a political will. It is so incredibly frustrating that the Democratic Party, and I'll be very partisan on this one. I'm usually not a real partisan guy. And then I'll explain some issues that Republicans have as well. But the Democratic Party is absolutely married to the environmental justice community, to the Sierra Clubs of the world. And they will not, and this is a Sierra Club, they will not allow us to do anything as it relates to vegetation management. They have dug their heels in. They have said absolutely not. And they are willing to continue to allow the state to burn to the ground. And until the governor actually makes it a priority, nothing is going to happen. And this is one of my biggest frustrations about all of this. There is a fix if there was a political will. There's three things that sustain fire. It's oxygen, it's fuel, and it's ignition. The only one of those things that we can really control is the fuel load. I don't care how good of a firefighter you are. If you can't bust your way through brush, if your vegetation has got ladder fuels going into canopies and it's running across the canopies in the forest system, only thing that you can do is bulldoze and drop water from the air because your hose isn't going to do much. And we have to give our firefighters the ability to fight these fires. Otherwise, we are going to continue to cremate hundreds of people. And if this is what the state of California actually wants, then they're well on their way of doing it. And it's so infuriating to me that some of our colleagues from the more urban settings do not understand. Because to me, it's also tied to housing. We have no housing, so the Bay Area, LA, are pushing into our district, which is pushing our district home prices through the roof. So we're moving into the hills. We're building more homes into these areas that are overgrown. And then we wonder why we have loss of life and we burn down structures. So until we have an honest conversation, until we work with our environmental community to come up with a comprehensive plan, I don't know if it's ever going to be fixed. But you're absolutely right. If there was one issue that I think the constituents from the Oregon border to the Mexican border, if there is one issue that I think that they should be up in arms about, it should be this. Because the state of California has failed them, the federal government has failed them, and both political parties have failed them. And it's high time that we take some responsibilities and we actually fix the problem, because there are professionals within CAL FIRE and within the Forest Service that know how to fix this if we made it a priority. But right now, we do not have the political will, and it's infuriating to me. And, we can go on a lot longer if you'd like me to, but it is a huge frustration of mine.
No, I think that's well said. So I think, we'll wrap it up here. But we've agreed quite a bit in this podcast, and I just can't agree with you that much. So there are a couple of bad qualities about you. Like, I find it abhorrent you're a San Francisco 49er fan, and we have to talk about this.
We'll talk about the Packers. And by the way, what is that score currently?
It's actually 14-0 right now, Green Bay. 14-0 Green Bay.
Yeah, I wonder what ref they paid off.
Typical Niner fan with your excuses. And you know what we say in Green Bay, whatever it takes to win. And that's all I have to say about that. Yeah. Okay, so just to close this out, the producers of this podcast, Lauren and Jeff, they feel like I get too much of a free ride, that I have the mic and I get to make fun of them all the time because, they're in the Air Force and the Marines, which is, abhorrent by itself. That's just silly because the Army is the real branch. So they would like you, for the listeners, you have free reign, take a shot, tell the listeners about the real Josh Whitfield.
Oh man, the real Josh Whitfield. How much time do I have?
30 seconds.
What you need to know about Josh Whitfield is he used to be a lean, mean fighting machine. And
okay, we're going to go here.
That's a few LBs ago. And I'm not sure he always comes dressed to the nine. He's always dressed up. I don't think I've ever seen Josh like at any event without a suit on. The problem is that I don't think he's upgraded his vest. Pants are fine, shirts are good, coat's good, but I don't think he's made a commitment to the vest just yet, because the vests tend to, lose a few buttons here and there. And I just think button extensions, those little slinky things that you hook on the buttons and give you another little inch or two, I just think we could do better, Josh. In Josh's defense, he is on a state salary, so it's really not his fault. The man's doing the best he can, right? So,
I was going to say, if I could get a men's warehouse budget, that would be great. And just for the record, I've been on the isogenics diet all year, and I'm down like 31 pounds now. So I'm fighting back.
Oh, absolutely amazing.
But not as much as my colleague Jason Laughlin, who's lost half of himself somewhere out there doing the keto diet.
Yeah,
he looks pretty good. So, but you're right, battling the weight gain. But I'm fighting back strong, man. It's a war I intend to win, and that was pretty rude of you, Heath. That was pretty rude, but I expect nothing less from a Niner fan and someone with a firefighter's background. But anyway, I appreciate you taking the time on a Sunday morning to hang out with me on a podcast right before an election. Thanks for being here today.
No, I appreciate all of you very much, and make sure that you get all of your friends and family to vote, and we'll talk to you very soon.
Yep, thank you. Thanks again for being here. I really enjoyed it. Again, that was State Assembly member Mr. Heath Flora, my friend, and of course, one of the many people who sign paychecks for me in the many jobs that I do in this world. And I do appreciate him for taking the time on a Sunday morning to join us here at Election Recon. Before I go any further, I was admonished by a couple of you who wrote into the show upset that I did not talk about the cigar of the show that I was smoking in last week's full episode of the Election Recon podcast. So I just want you guys to know that today's cigar is my all-time favorite cigar. It is the Gran Reserva Olivia Serie V Meliano from Olivia. It's my favorite cigar. I do believe it was Cigar Aficionado's 2014 Cigar of the Year. It is a double Toro in cut, and it's a wonderful cigar. So if you smoke cigars, I highly recommend you give that cigar a try. So with that piece of business out of the way, I want to talk a little bit before we get into the three-pointer segment. I want to talk a little bit about the debate. We're going to talk about the debate. We're going to talk a little bit about why so many prognosticators out there, why there's this two diverging views of what's going to happen on Election Day. Then I'm going to answer your questions, and hopefully we will be done in under an hour. But it doesn't look like that. I might be a little bit over. Of course, I always am. So I apologize to Lauren in advance. The debate. I thought it was the moderator. Everyone has opinions on the moderator. I thought of the three moderators of the three debates that we've seen. I thought she was the best. I was really surprised that the moderator actually directly asked Biden the questions on Burisma and court packing. I thought she was going to avoid those issues, especially after she released her topics for the debate. So kudos to her. Yes, she kind of stepped on President Trump a little bit more than Biden. I've seen all kinds of analysis on how many times she interrupted Trump versus how many times she interrupted Joe Biden. Listen, let's just be real. Trump loves that. He feeds off that. He wants it to be 2 versus 1. He doesn't want it to be 1 versus 1. He wants it to be him versus his opponent versus the media. So I'm not even going to entertain that part of the debate. I don't think the debate moves the needle. 95 to 97% of the electorate has already made up their mind. In close battleground states, the debate could have some sort of effect. And I thought Joe Biden made 2 critical errors in this debate. Okay? Joe Biden failed to put this Burisma Ukraine issue away. I thought his responses to it were weak. He went back to the impeachment hearings, which are almost a year old now. 2/3 of the year, just ancient history, when this whole laptop thing is brand new. And I really expected after 96 hours of debate prep that Joe Biden was going to have a canned prepped response to this laptop thing, and I don't think he did. So I think this Burisma laptop Ukraine thing, whether you believe it or not, is going to be an issue from now until Election Day. So that was a huge miss on Joe Biden. The second huge mistake I think Vice President Biden made was his comments on oil, energy, and fracking in the debate. He's been trying all week now to roll those statements back, but I think it's pretty damning when 50 plus million, 60 million people watch you say it on live television. That's going to hurt him in energy-rich states like New Mexico, like Pennsylvania, like the whole Rust Belt where this election is likely going to be decided. I thought that was a critical error. And for that reason, I gave the debate win to Donald Trump. He was able, I think, to pick up more strategic and tactical victories and make sure that he's going to have enough ammunition in the tank to fire at Joe Biden over the next 9 days. That's just a fact. Depending on where you're at in a partisan level, whose side are you on? You probably, if you're a Democrat and a Joe Biden fan or a Trump hater, you're going to be like, oh, that's just biased commentary. This guy just in the tank for the other side. No, that's just honestly where I feel it is. On the other side of it, I think Donald Trump made a huge gaffe when he was trying to joke around about Hispanic voters, which have been trickling up in the polls for him and support. And he pretty much said, you're an idiot. You have a low IQ. You're stupid if you show up and do the right thing to your court date, when he was talking about catch and release at the border, blah, blah, blah. I thought that was an incredibly stupid, off-the-cuff thing that President Donald Trump said. And if you're a big Trump MAGA fan, you're probably sitting there going, oh, this guy doesn't want Trump. There's a certain guy on social media that's been tearing me up quite a bit over the president and thinks I'm out to destroy him. And I don't believe that's the case. I'm just trying to give you the facts as I see it. And I could be wrong, and you're free to disagree with me. And I love the fact that when people do disagree, because it means you have your own mind and your own opinion, and that is American as apple pie. So that's my thoughts on the debate. I really think Joe Biden hurt himself way more than Donald Trump did. Therefore, I give President Trump the debate win there. And we'll have to see how it plays out in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Iowa, and even states like New Mexico, where like 1/3 of their state budget is dependent on oil. Now, I don't think in any stretch of the imagination Donald Trump's going to win New Mexico. If Donald Trump does win New Mexico, he has had a historic election defeat that nobody saw coming. So we'll have to just keep our eye on that. Now, let's talk about 9 days out, where everyone is. The main street, despite what I thought, I told you a couple weeks ago, two things are going to happen, because the data that we're looking at right now, okay, on early voting, voter registration, empirical data. This is not subjective. This is not opinion. These are actual votes that are there. Okay, and we can, you can go to places like Target Smart and all these different models out there. They'll model it by party. We can debate about all that. But the fact of the matter is, yes, I mean, Democrats and the mainstream media, they're all up in arms, ecstatic over this historic early voting surge that we've seen. But I'm not unimpressed by the numbers, but I'm unimpressed right now of the margins between Democrats and Republicans. Generally, common wisdom is that higher turnout favors Democrats, but I don't necessarily think the turnout might be as high. It's going to be higher than 2016. It may even be record turnouts, but some of these models are predicting completely unrealistic turnouts for a U.S. election. I just don't believe they're going to get that high. I've seen some models in California, a state that struggles to get max turnout, showing California at like 91 to 3% turnout. I just don't for a minute believe that's going to happen. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I just don't see it happening. I do think it's going to be higher than the average, higher than normal across the country everywhere. Yes, early voting has been turned on its head nationally, coast to coast, border to border. That is true, okay? But the margins in states like Florida, North Carolina, Wisconsin, and Arizona, 4 critical states in this election, look healthy for Republicans today. That is just a fact, and nobody in the mainstream media is really talking about it. Kudos to some political reporters. Some reporters from the Hill are starting to pick up on this. I'm telling you right now, Florida almost looks lost for Joe Biden, a state that a lot of these people still out there in the mainstream media have Joe Biden guaranteed to win. The margins are not there. Joe Biden is down under 50% in Miami-Dade County in the early vote, in which Democrats are dominating over Republicans because the president has taken a shit all over early voting, and Republicans loyal to him are going to hold on to their ballot and walk that thing in on Election Day. And Democrats who are going the opposite direction are just pushing their votes into the mail in defiance of the president's rhetoric and, of course, the COVID thing. You would think that the margins in these battleground states would be extremely better for Democrats than they are right now. That's just a fact. Now, there are some states like Pennsylvania where the margins look very healthy for Democrats, almost what you would expect. But then we also have to take into account that there's no in-person early voting in Pennsylvania. It's all mail-in early voting, and we're going to have to wait and see what those lines look on Election Day. So I'm really baffled right now. I've met Nate Silver back in 2008 when I was working for McCain Palin. I met him before he was, super famous. He was coming up in popularity. He was running his blog, and he came into the Western Regional Campaign headquarters for a couple days. And worked out of our bullpen there in the McCain campaign. And I met him there, and he's a nice guy. A lot of conservative commentators and prognosticators out there kind of like to trash the guy. He can fire back at polls he thinks are too partisan on the Republican side. I'm not going to get into that fight. I generally think he's a good dude. I generally think he's a smart dude. But I'm telling you, man, he is going to have a problem if he's totally wrong again, like he was in 2016. And our model here at Election Recon, and again, at no stretch of the imagination are we pretending to be Nate Silver, but we just do not see it the way he sees it. And our model, there's just zero chance that our model is going to go towards 90% chance of a Joe Biden win, because we're not seeing it in the empirical data in early vote and voter registration. We're just not. It's not there right now. So, and Nate Silver in 538 isn't the only one. All these national polls have the president up almost. Have the former Vice President Joe Biden up by almost 10 points. A 10% national win that would be catastrophic for Republicans and Donald Trump. It would be a wipeout. There's a lot of mainstream media prognosticators out there that are expecting a 380 to a 415 electoral vote massacre of Donald Trump in favor of Joe Biden. We are not seeing it. And I'm telling you, pollsters and again, we've said it, the polls were not that wrong in 2016. They missed big in some battleground states, but the popular vote nationally was pretty close. This time around, if Donald Trump wins, the polls are going to be way off, inexcusably off. And you have to ask yourself the question. Why? How can that be possible if Donald Trump and Republicans pull out another upset election victory in terms of the media narrative? If Donald Trump wins re-election 9 days from now, if Republicans hold on to the Senate, if Republicans outperform expectations in the race for the U.S. House of Representatives, these people are not going to be trusted in this country. I'm talking about the media outlets, the major pollsters, guys like Nate Silver will not be trusted for a generation, and they shouldn't be, because as far as I can see it, if they're this wrong in 20, which would be even way wrong, more wrong than they were in 2016. If they are this wrong, it's obviously bias. But the only real question is, was it intentional bias to affect election expectations of people? Okay, did they intentionally try to put their thumb on the scale? Or is it some abnormality in their way of thinking or their model, which is still ignorance at an inexcusable level? Now, they could be right. And that was a very critical thing of the mainstream media and stuff that I put out there. Certainly, it's mathematically possible that it could be right. And I'm going to tell you how that is, okay? Now, what we believe here at Election Recon, what a lot of the pro-ams out there believe and are putting out on social media, is that this is going to be a close election, okay? We believe that because of the voter registration data, the early voting data that we're seeing, they're not matching up with the polling. We also, in our model, our model is not projecting that Donald Trump is going to do anything less than around 88% of Republican support. A lot of these polls, a lot of these other models out there in the professional punditry have crazy support numbers for Republicans, like in the high 70s for the president or the low 80s. We think that's insane at this point. Maybe that was true at the beginning of summer during this COVID crisis, which has certainly been a weight on President Trump's reelection chances. That being said, it appears by all empirical data that Republicans have coalesced around Donald Trump, whether they like him or not. And let's not forget, Donald Trump has always, in 2016 and all the special elections and the midterms in 18 that he got involved in, Donald Trump has always overperformed his polls and his favorability rating. And that means people that don't like him, even Republicans that may not like him, are swallowing the turpentine to vote for him. And we believe it's that way for a couple reasons. One, we think that Democrats have hurt themselves tremendously by this whole court packing narrative. I think a lot of Republicans out there that may have stayed home or don't like President Donald Trump are saying, listen, man, I don't like this guy, but that's crazy. We can't stand by while they change the judiciary of this country in that radical of a fashion. And I think that motivates. We always see the Supreme Court motivate Republicans more than Democrats. Getting Justice Barrett confirmed as Judge Barrett confirmed as a justice on the Supreme Court, which is likely going to happen by tomorrow night in the U.S. Senate, reminds evangelical, religious, even mainstream Republican. It unites the court unites all the factions of the Republican Party. So I think this court thing has actually been a gift to Republicans, and that's why we're seeing the polls maybe are wrong. That Republican support, maybe even independent support that is more center-right, has coalesced around the president when it didn't look like it was going to be that way at the start of the summer. So that's what our model believes. That's kind of what we are seeing, okay? These professional prognosticators out there, the mainstream media, they do not see it that way still. They still think independents are going to break 2.5, 3-1 for Joe Biden in a referendum on Donald Trump. And make no mistake, this election is a referendum on Donald Trump. It has a lot less to do with Joe Biden. However, I think Joe Biden perhaps is not what some independents and Republicans are looking at. They're looking at it as a defense against progressive values and policies. So maybe it's not do I like or dislike Joe Biden in that other half of the ideology's way of thinking, but it could be we really have to defend against radical change in the country. And if that's really the narrative that is dominating some voters' minds, that could be getting people to do that silent majority style voting. It's hard to call it a silent majority when they lost the popular vote in 2016. But my point is that silent or shy Trump voter may actually be a real thing. And we certainly think that it is here at Election Recon. So we do not understand why some of these national polls are being weighted in the way that they are being weighted when all empirical data and evidence suggests otherwise. They have huge margins in terms of Democrat turnout over Republican turnout. We don't think that's going to be the case. Maybe more Democrats vote nationally, but we don't think it's going to be this huge divide of Republicans staying at home and Democrats not voting. We think everybody's going to be voting. This is a huge, controversial, dramatic election, and everyone is getting out to say it. We see that because we look at Georgia and Texas. We look at Georgia and Texas, and you would think, wow, the turnout there is historic, astronomical, and it is. But when you dig deep in the data suggests that Republicans are winning. They're winning despite the turnout, the early votes in the states of Georgia and Texas. So this narrative that Republicans are in deep trouble in Texas is confusing to us. Maybe we're wrong. Like we've always said, this is the maiden voyage. This is the shakedown cruise of our methodology and our way of thinking here at Election Recon. We openly admit we can be wrong, but we are convinced that we are not in this regard. This election, we believe, is going to be close. And even if Joe Biden and the Democrats win a close race, serious questions have to be asked of the mainstream media and the professional punditry out there. Guys like Nate Silver, Nate Cohn, Cook Political, I should say, serious questions have to be asked about these people because there will be no trust in their prognostications in the future. If Joe Biden does not win the national vote by 4.5%, 5% or more, when they're saying he's going to win by 10%, okay, on the average, if he doesn't win by at least 4.5% in my mind, something is really, really wrong in the professional punditry out there, and questions need to be asked. If he doesn't win by, 330, if Joe Biden wins this election just by 280 or 300 electoral votes, questions have to be asked. Serious questions have to be asked. And that's truly, passionately what we believe right now. There can only be one, like Highlander. Two ways of thinking: the pro-am way of thinking, and the professionals, or like real Red Eagle politics, like he's coined it out on the Twitterverse, the social media sphere. He calls them the election mafia, and I really like that nickname. If the election mafia is that wrong, questions have to be asked. Why? How can you get it so wrong 2 national election cycles in a row? And I really hope people in this country are going to hold their feet to the fire, because if people who are passing themselves off as true journalists, nonpartisans, they're just trying to give themselves, they're trying to be right and give you the truth. If people are trying to pass the truth off to you, and it has been so wrong 2 times in a row, you deserve to ask them questions on why that is. And that is kind of my rant of the week. So we'll have to wait and see. It's going to be a very interesting election. We think it is close. I don't know if our model continues to ever so slightly inch towards President Donald Trump. It has never had Donald Trump ahead, but proof positive that our model is shifting towards the right is we now have Republicans controlling the U.S. Senate, projected control of the U.S. Senate, where most professional punditry or election mafia models out there have it a 75% chance that Democrats hold the Senate. 75%, 3 and 4. Okay? They have it at 90% practically that Joe Biden's going to win this thing. If this thing's close, they're going to have to ask questions, man, or answer questions. It's not making sense to us right now. So our model is weighting the actual data we have more heavily, and that's why our model shows a closer race. Still have Joe Biden up. I don't know where that model is going to finish on Election Day. I think it's going to be very close. I do believe the race will tighten. Can Donald Trump reach 270 in our model? Possibly. But time is running out for our model for Donald Trump to get there. I don't think we're going to see Donald Trump up by a states poll margin. And we should be reminiscent. States poll, these guys, states poll, Red Eagle Politics, these guys practically, I think they both missed 2 or 3 states in 2016. So they weren't that wrong. And so they should be taken seriously, in our opinion. Even though we're really just going off our model, no matter what anyone says, the pro-ams or the election mafia or the professional punditry. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the 3 points with Josh Whitfield, where I answer the questions that you send in. We had a whole bunch of questions sent in for this week. Sorry we can't get to all of them on the podcast. We have written those of you that sent questions in back your answers. But let's finish with these 3 very good questions right now. The first one comes from Marcos from San Diego, California, and he writes, really excited to find the Election Recon podcast. Are you going to stay and keep it going after the election? Marcos, thank you for writing in. Thank you for your support. Yes, the ER project is here to stay. Election Recon is not going anywhere. We will stick around for indefinitely into the future. We're heavily invested in this. We're all passionate about it. Thanks for writing in. The next question comes from Gladys from Scottsdale, Arizona. Gladys writes, I'm really getting the feeling something has changed over the last month. There are Trump McSally signs everywhere the eye can see. It is even more than 2016. I really think Trump and McSally are going to win Arizona. Do you think it can happen? Gladys, we have the state tilt Trump and the presidency right now in our model. We have it tilt Democrat for Democrat challenger Mark Kelly right now. Our model is consistently showing McSally 3.5 points behind Donald Trump. We think there's strong evidence of some ticket splitters, but it used to be 5 points behind Donald Trump. So that gap has narrowed. I think if Trump can carry Arizona by 3 points, maybe 2.5, 3.5 points, he could potentially pull McSally over the line. So yes, it can happen. More likely than not, we think, or our model simulates a small Trump win in Arizona and a small Kelly win in Arizona, somewhere around the 1 to 3 point range for each of them. So again, we could be wrong. We'll have to see what happens on Election Day. Thank you for sending that in. I do want to finish it up, though. Signs, flags, parades, even rally sizes, which does show enthusiasm, and we do believe there is more base enthusiasm for President Trump. I think that speaks for itself. You can see the differences in the size of their rallies. You can see these huge parades everywhere in the country for Trump. There was just a huge one in the next town over from me in Houston today for President Donald Trump. So yes, it shows enthusiasm, but it doesn't win elections, okay? Only votes win elections. So it's about turnout. And I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm looking for on Election Day, okay? I think Democrats are the vast majority of Democrats are voting early. I don't expect that there's going to be a whole lot of Democrats on Election Day left. If there are a lot of Democrats on Election Day left, Republicans are dead on arrival. Okay, so if the Democrats have some 38-40% of the Election Day turnout, it is over for Republicans. It is over for Donald Trump. I personally don't believe that's going to happen, but I'll be watching for that. If Republicans are in the high 60s area of turnout on Election Day, it's going to be, which is kind of what we think is going to happen. It's going to be very close in these battleground states across the board. So even though we have Republicans winning the Senate right now, it's a 54% chance Republicans hold the Senate. 54%. And I mean, it's basically a toss-up. So yes, it can happen. We're going to have to wait and see. Arizona is going to be very close, we think. Thanks for writing in, Gladys. Victor from Ghent, I think I'm saying that right, Ghent, Belgium. has written in, and we love these international views. Belgium happens to be, we get about 17 listeners from Belgium a week, according to the analytics. Belgium's the top European country, believe that or not, so far listening to the podcast. So, Victor, thanks for writing in. He writes, "Hello from Belgium. I like how you are giving simple information for us to understand the U.S. election. Many polls in Europe show the EU wants Mr. Biden to win. Most of Europe watching U.S. election with great interest. Do you think U.S. voters take our opinions here in Europe when voting?" No. I do not think. Maybe the globalist view out there, which I don't think dominates the American voter's mind, does. Maybe some like high-level academics and intellectuals do care that much about what Europe, our allies in Europe and the international community thinks about the country. But by and large, I do not think, Victor, the American voter is too concerned about what Europe thinks they should do. We're fiercely independent-minded people. Perhaps the American ego, probably no. That's the short answer, man. No, but I think it's awesome that you guys are paying attention to the election. I personally am always fascinated with the elections in England, the United Kingdom in particular. So, as a fellow election geek and nerd, man, I appreciate that you're paying attention. Thank you for writing in, Victor. Stay safe over there in Europe. That's all we got. I'm 15 minutes over again, so I'm sure I'm about to be admonished by Lauren. I'm Josh Whitfield. This has been Election Recon. If you like our show and our content, please like, subscribe, follow, and share. You can find us on social media and on the internet at Election Recon on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And, of course, you can continue to listen to this podcast and our weekly daily updates wherever you get your podcasts on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher Radio, and Apple Podcasts. We certainly appreciate the support and the feedback. Please keep writing in the show, elect singular, recon at gmail.com. Next week, we will have Michael Douglas from KFIV 1360 AM, local California radio station, who I will be helping provide election analysis the night of the election for. Mike will join us, and we will prep our show for the election night. We will have a special podcast the day before the election and final projections for all of you who've written in on that. So expect a lot more to come. I'm looking forward to Mike Douglas joining us next week. I'm looking forward to you joining us next week. Again, I'm Josh Whitfield. You have a great Sunday. You have a great weekend. Have a good work week. We're only 9 days left. We'll see you next time.